Granted, it pukes all over Star Trek's lore, but Season 1 of Discovery actually has a lot right with it. Not so much that, but the show did a few things that could have made it completely groundbreaking Trek, as well as just genuinely good storytelling. But the writers consistently wussed out and dodged the hard questions.
You know your problem? No follow-through.
Point 1. Captain Lorca offers us a rarity in Star Trek. A Starfleet captain with war injuries and PTSD. With the notable exception of Nog's character arc in Deep Space Nine and a little bit with Chief O'Brien, Star Trek generally doesn't show us the psychological damage that war does. Discovery's Captain Lorca began as a man with demons who nonetheless rangered up and did his job. He had a moral grayness that nicely offset the rest of Star Trek, where the Federation tends to be a bit sanctimonious. Lorca could have been one of the most interesting captains of the entire Trek franchise, a man balancing noble ideals against the horrors of war in his own experience. He was almost a study of a good man forced to do horrific things in the service of a good cause. By adding that to the lore of the early Federation, Lorca could have made Roddenberry's utopian vision all the more accessible by showing us some of the steps between here and there. But no, he's from the Evil Mirror universe, so we don't have to grapple with any of that. Point 2. The plot to destroy the Klingon homeworld. The season revolves around the war with the Klingons. They launch a massive offensive targeting Earth, and if their offensive succeeds, it will result in the complete extermination of the human species. The last episode centers around a plan to plant a bomb deep inside a volcano on Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. A bomb that, when detonated, will cause so much ecological damage that their planet will be uninhabitable, thereby crippling their empire. Consider how this could have played out. The Federation team is in place and the bomb is ready, but the team is surrounded, unable to escape. They'll be overrun at any moment. The Federation captain has seconds to decide: sacrifice herself, her team, and commit genocide, or try to save the crew and almost certainly lose the war and all of mankind. And she presses the detonator, leaving the first officer to get the ship and crew home. Eruptions and quakes ripple across Kronos. The core of the Klingon Empire is devastated. Now think back to those shots of the Klingon capital in Next Generation. Every time we see it, it's shrouded in black clouds, filthy, looking like some post-industrial urban nightmare. Consider if in Discovery we saw Kronos as a temperate world, that we then watched it be nearly destroyed by a Federation attack. That every time we saw that dark, miserable Kronos in other iterations of Trek, we now realized that the Federation did that. It would cast the Klingons' fixation on the warrior aspect of their culture in a new light, while also adding depth to some of what we saw in Enterprise about the direction that Klingon society had been going.
We were a great society, not so long ago, when honor was earned through integrity and acts of true courage.
And what could have been done with the Federation in the aftermath of that victory? Humanity would be confronted with knowing that, as far as we've come from the warring tribes of the past, we're still fundamentally the same people. And that the Federation, always portrayed as a human-led alliance, is bound together not only by the ideals enshrined in the Federation Charter, but by respect for that human civilization itself, the glue that binds it together, that extends a hand of peace to all other civilizations, but almost destroyed the damn Klingons when it came to blows. It makes the Federation ideals more important because they can't be taken for granted. They have to be worked for and protected. And for us as viewers, it shows us that Star Trek isn't a future for some hypothetical better version of us. It's a future that we can build ourselves through our own choices and actions. But instead they chickened out. The only one willing to use the bomb was from the Evil Mirror universe. Our heroes stopped the heinous act just in time, and it all just kind of worked out. I will give the writers credit for having the senior Federation officers consider a plan suggested to them by somebody from the Mirror Universe, symbolizing the influence of our darker nature and all that. But they threw that away by having the characters that we actually like be universally and instantly appalled by the idea without having to struggle with it. It's a weak literary denial of that aspect of us that sometimes serves a vital survival function. Point 3, let's talk about Michael Burnham. Because overall in the first season, I kind of like this character. You see, Michael Burnham is a femshep. For the non-gamers, there's this game called Mass Effect that came out in 2006. You fly around on a spaceship, hopping across the galaxy, doing good deeds and fighting a big bad. You make decisions throughout the game that affect the direction that the story takes. Well, to some extent. And one of those decisions is right at the beginning, when you have to choose whether your Commander Shepard is going to be male or female. It's one option that changes the body type. There's no screen full of sliders to adjust intersectionalities that alter the core of the story. Shepard is Shepard, regardless of the outward physical appearance. I don't know for certain, but I suspect that in a very early draft of the script, they wrote Michael Burnham as a dude, and only later decided to cast a woman in the role. Much like a gamer making their Commander Shepard female instead of the default normative action Chad. In episode 1, Burnham thinks that she knows better than her captain. She's so confident that her instincts are correct that she mutinies and tries to preemptively attack the Klingons, only to get shut down and sent to the brig before all the butchering that would have ensued anyway begins. Nice job, Mikey. But Picard disobeyed orders too. Kirk did it all the time. The difference is that they were starship captains, and they turned out to be right. Burnham, by contrast, was a first officer, contradicting her captain, and she completely misread the Klingons' intentions. It subverts the whole hero assumption, and it reinforces the insubordinate actions of previous Trek captains as informed decisions made by skilled professionals with information that their superiors didn't have. Burnham made unfounded assumptions, and she tried to take shortcuts. It could have shown us a young Federation officer taking initiative, making mistakes, and learning from them. Instead, Discovery veers off into Chosen One territory, setting very bad omens for future seasons. And the truth of it is that we can't even really blame the writers for this any more than we can blame a dog for failing calculus. Most of today's Star Trek writers, directors, and producers were born into the industry. It's their life experience. By contrast, Gene Roddenberry was the son of a cop and he flew a bomber in a world war. It shouldn't be surprising to us that today's Trek lacks depth. So do its writers. As a great example, let's take a step back to the Kobayashi Maru. When I was a kid, I had this image of young cadet Kirk learning about this test, that it was unwinnable. I imagined him sneaking into the simulation center one night and making some modifications to the code for the test, buffing his shields just a little bit here, nerfing the Klingons' weapons a little bit, extending the transporter range by a few kilometers, making it possible, if you did things just right, to get in there, rescue the crew of the stranded ship, and then get out of the neutral zone. The next day, he takes the Kobayashi Maru test, and despite many tense moments and almost losing his ship in the simulation, he manages to eke out a win, much to the suspicion of the Academy faculty. Instead, we got this.
All ships destroyed, Captain.
Begin rescue of the stranded crew.
Half a century of lore, a formative moment in Star Trek's most iconic captain's life. And the best that the current cadre of writers can give us is a man-child smugly eating an apple. And like Kirk's early years in Starfleet, that first season of Star Trek Discovery is a potentially great story. A story about two cultures. One, proud warriors losing their traditions to galaxy-wide cultural diffusion. The other, young and ascendant, confident in a superior morality that they have only very recently become comfortable and prosperous enough to really believe in. both cultures are tested to their limits, and both reclaim their soul by nearly being destroyed at the hands of the other. It's a profound and epic story that unfortunately was told by people who just weren't up to telling it.